Jack Miller stood on the landing pad of Outpost Delta and felt the wind kick up. Dust against his legs, the planet was barren and gray with no trees and no water. It was a hard place to live, but it was home to the soldiers who guarded the edge of human space. Jack pulled his collar up to protect his neck from the grit. He looked up at the sky, which was turning a strange shade of violet. The air shimmered with heat and energy. Everyone on the base was watching the sky. They were waiting for the ship from the Galactic Council. For a long time, humanity had been fighting a war against the Kyle Empire. The Quell were strong and had many ships. Humans were tired. They had lost many colonies and many friends. The Galactic Council was supposed to be neutral. They were supposed to keep peace between all species, but for decades the Council had ignored human pleas for help. Now, suddenly, they were sending someone. Jack did not know if this was good news or bad news. He just knew that his soldiers were weary. They needed rest, but they also needed safety. The ship descended slowly. It was smooth and white, unlike the rough metal of human vessels. It did not make a loud noise. It floated down like a feather landing on stone. When it touched the ground, the engines hummed softly and then went silent. A ramp lowered from the side of the ship. Steam hissed out as the seal broke. Jack straightened his back. He wanted to look professional. He wanted to show that humans were still strong, even if they were tired. Woman stepped out of the ship. She was tall and moved with grace. She wore long white robes that seemed to glow in the dim light of the planet. Her skin was pale and her eyes were a bright silver color. She did not look like she belonged on a dusty military base. She looked like she belonged in a temple. Jack walked forward to meet her. His boots crunched on the gravel. He stopped a few feet away and saluted. "Welcome to Outpost Delta," Jack said. His voice was steady. "I am Captain Jack Miller." The woman nodded slightly. "I am Grace," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I represent the Galactic Council. I have come to discuss the cessation of hostilities." Jack lowered his hand. He gestured toward the main building of the base. "Please follow me. We have a command center prepared for you." Grace walked beside him. She did not look at the buildings or the weapons. She looked at the soldiers. There were men and women standing at attention along the path. Their uniforms were worn and patched. Some had scars on their faces. Grace scanned them with curiosity. She did not look at them with pity. She looked at them like she was studying a new kind of animal. Jack noticed this. It made him feel uneasy. He was used to people looking at his soldiers with respect or fear. Grace looked at them with calculation. Inside the base, the air was cooler. The lights hummed overhead. Sam Collins was waiting by the door. He was the communications officer. He was a young man with quick eyes and nervous hands. He watched Grace walk past him. Sam leaned close to Jack as they walked down the hallway. "Oh, you trust her?" Sam whispered. "I do not." "No," Jack whispered back. "Keep an eye on the sensors. If her ship powers up weapons, I want to know immediately." Sam nodded and moved away to his station. Jack led Grace into the main briefing room. It was a large room with a metal table in the center. Maps were pinned to the walls. Screens showed data from the border patrols. Grace stood at the head of the table. She placed her hands on the metal surface. "I know you have many questions," Grace said. "I am here to bring an end to the suffering The council has decided that the war has gone on too long. Jack crossed his arms. Ending the war is what we all want, but we need to know the cost. Grace looked at him. Her silver eyes were unreadable. There is always a cost, Captain. The question is whether you are willing to pay it for peace. The room was quiet. The only sound was the ventilation system moving air through the vents. Jack looked at the faces of his crew. They were waiting for him to speak. They were waiting to see if this woman was a savior or a jailer. Jack took a deep breath. He knew that nothing in this galaxy was free. Peace usually came with a price tag. He just hoped the price was not too high for his people to afford. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Tell us the terms, Jack said. Duck. Grace nodded. She tapped the table and the lights in the room dimmed. Hologram flickered to life above the metal surface. It showed the galaxy. Blue dots represented human worlds. Red dots represented KRYL space. Yellow lines showed the battlefronts. It was a map of pain and conflict. Grace pointed to the blue dots. This is your current status, she said, and this is how it will change. Jack leaned forward. He was ready to listen, but he was also ready to fight. He had seen too many treaties break. He had seen too many promises fail. He would not let this woman take away their ability to defend themselves without a very good reason. The air in the room felt heavy. Arrival of Grace was the beginning of something big. Jack could feel it in his bones. The war was about to change, but he did not know if it was changing for the better. The hologram hovered in the air, casting a blue light over the faces of the human officers. Grace stood tall beside the projection. She moved her hand and the image shifted. The red dots of the KRL Empire began to shrink. Blue dots of humanity expanded, but they changed color. They turned from bright blue to a dull gray. The council proposes an immediate ceasefire, Grace said. Her voice was calm, like she was reading a grocery list. In exchange, humanity must dismantle its main fleet. All capital ships will be decommissioned. Your weapon systems will be locked down. Jack felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He looked at Captain Kelly White. She was sitting to his right. Kelly was a tough woman who had lost a brother to the KR will. Her jaw tightened as she heard the words dismantle the fleet. Kelly said, you want us to give up our ships? Yes, Grace replied. Without weapons you cannot attack. Without the ability to attack, the Carwell will have no reason to fight. Peace requires submission. Jack shook his head. That is not peace. That is surrender. If we give up our ships, we are helpless. The Carwell do not honor treaties. They raid colonies. They take prisoners. If we have no fleet, who stops them? The council will protect you, Grace said. You will accept protection status within alien borders. You will be safe. Safe in a cage, Jack muttered. Sam Collins spoke up from the corner. We have data on Kyle raids. Last month they hit 3 mining stations. The council ship was in the sector. You did not stop them. Grace turned her head to look at Sam. The council operates under strict neutrality protocols. We cannot intervene unless there is a total genocide event. Raids do not qualify, so we die slowly instead of all at once. Kelly said. Her voice was sharp. I will not sign this. My people did not fight for 10 years to become pets. Grace looked around the room. She saw the anger in their eyes. She saw the tension in their shoulders. She had visited many world, she had seen many species accept the Council's terms. They usually cried. With relief, they were happy to give up the burden of war, but these humans were different. They were not relieved. They were offended. Why do you resist? Grace asked. I am offering you safety. Why do you choose danger? Jack stood up. He walked around the table. He stopped in front of Grace. He was not trying to intimidate her. He was trying to make her understand. You think we fight because we like violence, Jack said. We do not. We fight because we have families on Earth. We have children on the colonies. If we put down our guns, the Quell will walk into our homes. You call it submission. We call it survival. Grace watched him closely. She looked at the map again. She saw the red lines pushing against the blue. She realized that humans did not see the galaxy as a game of strategy. They saw it as a home that needed defending. Her training told her that primitive species were aggressive, but she was not seeing aggression. She was seeing love. They were willing to die to protect each other. This is illogical, Grace said. Submission guarantees survival of the species. Resistance risks extinction. Maybe, Jack said, but living in fear is not surviving. We would rather burn out than fade away. Kelly White slammed her hand on the table. We need guarantees. If you want our ships, you give us shields. You give us weapons that can stop a KRL cruiser. You do not just take our teeth and tell us to smile. Grace was silent. She processed their words. The Council had never encountered species that valued freedom over safety. It was a confusing concept to her. She had been taught that order was the highest good, chaos was the enemy, but these humans embraced a certain kind of chaos. They embraced the risk. I cannot change the terms on my own, Grace said. I must report this to the Council. Then report it, Kelly said, but tell them the answer is no. Tell them humanity stands alone before we stand down. Grace nodded. Slowly, she turned off the hologram. Room became dark again. The only light came from the screens on the walls. She looked at Jack. There was a new expression on her face. It was not pity anymore. It was respect. You are a stubborn species, Grace said. We have to be, Jack replied. Grace walked to the window. She looked out at the bare landscape. She saw the soldiers walking. In the distance, they were patrolling. They were ready. She realized that her mission was not going to be simple. She came to enforce a rule, but she was meeting a people who lived by their own rules. The tension in the room did not go away. It settled like dust. Everyone knew that the decision had not been made. The Council would not like the answer, and if the Council did not like the answer, they might stop helping altogether, or worse, they might help the KR. Jack knew this risk. Kelly knew this risk, but neither of them flinched. They would not trade their future for a quiet life. The meeting was interrupted by a loud siren. The red lights on the walls began to flash. The sound was sharp and urgent. Jack turned to Sam. Collins, report, Jack shouted. Sam was typing fast on his console. His face was pale. Quell signatures, multiple bogies. They are coming in fast. Grace stepped forward. This is impossible. The Council ship is here. The KRL know not to attack during negotiations. They do not care. Kelly White said she was already moving toward the door. Sound the general alarm. Get the troops to the bunkers. Jack grabbed his rifle from the rack. He checked the charge. It was full. Grace stood still for a moment. She looked confused. Her protocol said she was safe, her ship was neutral, but the alarms did not lie. The ground shook as explosions hit the outer perimeter. Dust fell from the ceiling. "Move, Jack!" yelled at Grace. "You need to get to your ship." "No," Grace said, "I must observe." "There is no time to observe." Jack said. He grabbed her arm. It was not gentle, it was necessary. They ran into the hallway. Smoke was already filling the air, the smell of burnt metal was strong. Soldiers ran past them. In the opposite direction, they were heading to the defense guns. They reached the command bunker. It was underground, thick doors sealed behind them, but the building above them took a hit. The floor jumped, lights flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in, casting the room in a dim orange glow. Sam's voice came over the radio. "They are targeting the generators. They are ignoring the council ship." Grace listened to the report. Her eyes widened. "They are ignoring me." "Of course they are," Jack said. He was looking at the security monitors. Screens showed fire outside. KRYL dropships were landing in the courtyard. Enemy soldiers poured out. They were tall and wore black armor. They moved like machines. Jack opened the comms channel. "All units engage the enemy. Protect the generators. Do not let them breach the core." Grace watched the screens. She saw human medics running out into the open. There was fire everywhere. A missile hit a wall near the medical tent. Debris flew everywhere. Grace expected the medics to run away. She expected them to save themselves. Instead, they ran toward the fire. "Look," Grace said. She pointed at the screen. A young engineer named Peter Jones was on the screen. He was near a power conduit. An explosion knocked him down. Another soldier was trapped under a beam. Peter did not run. He crawled back. He lifted the beam with his shoulder. He pushed the other soldier out of the way. Another explosion hit close to them. Peter shielded the teammate with his own body. Grace stopped breathing for a second. "Why did he do that?" she asked. "His survival probability was 0, because that is what we do," Jack said. He watched Peter on the screen. Peter did not get up. Jack felt a pang of loss. He knew Peter. He was a good kid. Grace looked at Jack. She looked at the other humans in the room. They were not panicking. They were working. They were angry. The fear was there, but it was buried under duty. Grace had been taught that lower species acted on instinct. Self-preservation was the primary instinct, but these humans were overriding their instinct. They were choosing to die for each other. The violence contradicted everything Grace was taught. She thought humans needed control. She thought they were dangerous because they were wild. Now she saw they were dangerous because they cared too much. Another explosion rocked the bunker. Dust fell on Grace's white robes. They were no longer white. They were gray with dirt. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. "I cannot stay in here," Grace said. "You are safe here," Jack said. "I'm not safe if I do nothing," Grace replied. She looked at the door. The Carwell were getting closer. The human lines were holding, but barely. If the generators fell, the shields would drop. Then everyone would die. Grace made a decision. She stepped toward the command console. Jack watched her. He did not stop her. He saw the change in her posture. She was not an envoy anymore. She was something else. "What are you doing?" Jack asked. "I am done watching," Grace said. Grace placed her hands on the console. Her fingers moved fast over the controls. The screen flashed with red warnings. Access denied, protocol violation. Grace ignored the warnings. She typed in a code from her own memory. It was a master override key. What is that code? Sam asked. He was watching her screen. It is my authority, Grace said. I am revoking my neutrality. The system beeped. Access granted. Grace looked at Jack. Redirect my ship's energy shield. Cover the human barracks. Cover the generators. Leave my ship exposed. Jack stared at her. That will leave you vulnerable. If they target your ship, you will be destroyed. I know, Grace said. Do it. Sam executed the command. Outside, a blue dome of energy shimmered into existence. It did not cover the White Council ship. It covered the human buildings. KRL plasma bolts hit the shield and bounced off. Human soldiers behind the shield cheered. They could not believe it. Jack grabbed his rifle. All units, the shield is up. Push them back. We take the courtyard. Jack led the charge. He kicked open the side door. The air outside was hot. Smoke stung his eyes. Carwell soldiers were advancing. They stopped when they saw the humans coming out. They did not expect a counterattack. Jack fired his rifle. Blue energy bolts hit the KRYL armor. Grace followed him. She did not have a human gun. She raised her hand. A device on her wrist glowed. A pulse of energy shot out. It hit a KRL soldier. It did not kill him. It disabled his armor. The soldier fell down, unable to move. Grace fought alongside them. She moved through the battlefield. She used her alien technology to disable enemy weapons. She knocked rifles out of hands. She created barriers to stop grenades. The humans saw her. They saw the white robes getting dirty. They saw her taking risks. She is one of us, a soldier shouted. No, Jack said. She is better. The morale of the outpost shifted. Before, they felt alone. They felt like the galaxy hated them. Now they had an ally, a powerful ally. The fear turned into fire. They fought harder. They pushed the KRL back toward the drop ships. Grace stood next to Jack near the main generator. Kyle troops were trying to flank them. Grace raised her hand. Again, a wave of force pushed the enemy back. They stumbled and fell. Why are you helping us? Jack asked. He had to shout over the noise of battle. Because you are right, Grace said. Peace cannot be forced. It must be chosen. And you chose to fight for your home. I cannot stop that. I will not stop that. Jack nodded. He reloaded his rifle. Good. Then let's finish this. They fought together for an hour. The Quell realized they were losing. Their landing parties were trapped. Their ships were being targeted by human turrets. Now that the shield was focused elsewhere, the KRL commander signaled a retreat. The drop ships lifted off. They flew away fast, leaving burning wreckage on the ground. Silence returned to the outpost. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of exhaustion. Soldiers leaned against walls. Medics started treating the wounded. Jack looked at Grace. She was breathing hard. Her white robes were torn. There was soot on her face. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. You broke the council rules, Jack said. Yes, Grace said. I did. They might come for you. Let them come, Grace said. Jack looked at his soldiers. They were looking at Grace with respect. They were not skeptical anymore. They saw her as a comrade. She was willing to bleed for their cause. The fire started inside. Their world was now burning bright. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about pride. Humanity had proven they could stand up, and now they had a friend who stood with them. The smoke began to clear from the sky. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the base. The Carwell forces had retreated completely. There were no more enemies. On the sensors, the outpost was damaged, but it was standing. The generators were humming again. The lights were steady. Jack stood on the landing pad where Grace had arrived. The White Council ship was still there. It was silent. Grace stood next to him. She had changed her clothes. She was no longer wearing the glowing white robes she wore standard human fatigues. They were a little big for her, but she did not care. The symbolic change was clear. She was not an envoy anymore. She was a soldier. Did you send the message? Jack asked. Yes, Grace said. I sent it to the Galactic Council. I told them that humanity is no longer under their jurisdiction. I told them that we are independent. That will make them angry. Jack said. They are already angry. Grace replied. They will cut off trade. They might sanction us, but they will not attack, not after seeing what happened. Here they respect power, and today you showed power. Jack looked at the ship. It looked out of place now. It belonged to a world of rules and order. This base was a world of grit and survival. Grace followed his gaze. I cannot go back, Grace said. If I return, they will wipe my memory. They will reset my programming. I cannot let them do that. I have seen too much. You are staying, Jack said. It was not a question. I am staying, Grace confirmed. I want to see how this ends. I want to see if humans can win this war. Jack smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. We do not know if we will win, but we will not stop fighting. I know, Grace said. That is why I am here. They looked out at the repaired skyline. The stars were coming out. They looked bright and cold. There were many enemies out there. The Carwell would come back. The council might try to interfere again. The war was not over. This was just one battle. But the dynamic had changed. Humanity was not just defending anymore. They were taking the fight to the enemy. News of the battle was already spreading. Sam Collins had broadcast the footage. Other human colonies were watching. They saw the council ship shielding the base. They saw Grace fighting alongside Jack. The fire started inside. Their world was spreading. Other colonies were calling in. They were ready to fight. They were ready to join the resistance. Grace stood next to Jack. She watched the stars. She was no longer a judge. She was a participant. She had come to end a war with paper and words. Instead, she started a fire with action and courage. Humanity proved they did not need a savior. Jack thought they did not need someone to fix their problems. They needed someone brave enough to stand with them. Grace was that person. What happens tomorrow? Grace asked. Tomorrow, we repair the walls, Jack said. Then we fix the ships. Then we go find the Quell. Grace nodded. She liked that plan. It was simple. It was direct. It was human. The wind blew across the landing pad. It was still dusty, but it felt cleaner. The air smelled of ozone and hope. Jack turned to go back inside. He had work to do. Grace turned with him. They walked side by side. The war was still out there in the dark, but inside the world of Outpost Delta, the fire was burning, and it would not go